Welcome to the Made to Parade podcast, sponsored by the British Drum Company, manufacturers of the Phantom, Regimental Series and Axial Parade drums that look amazing, sound amazing and feel amazing.
Folks, welcome along to another episode of the Made to Parade podcast, something a wee bit different. This time around, I am joined by three gentlemen who were involved in a conference that took place recently called Envisioning the Future, and we're going to have a wee bit of chat about what that was all about. But guys, you just want to introduce yourselves just to kind of kick things off, maybe say who you are and what it is that you do.
Hi, Glenn. I suppose I'll kick off. My name's James Key. I'm currently working on a Peace Impact programme employed by the Northwest Cultural Partnership. But I'm based out in the rural community in the Solace Centre, which is in the northwest of the province, halfway between Londonderry and Strabane.
Brilliant.
Hi Glenn, see you again. I've been on one of your podcasts before from the William King Memorial Flute Band. Like James, I also work in the Northwest Cultural Partnership as well, and before that I was coordinator of Londonderry Bands Forum for 5 years.
Brilliant.
Hi Glenn, I'm Brian Dougherty. I've been a community worker in Londonderry for about 25 years. I currently work with both the Northwest Cultural Partnership and the Londonderry Bands Forum.
Brilliant. Well, absolutely delighted to have you on, guys. Appreciate it, you taking the time out to be with us. Maybe it'd be useful for us to start with a wee bit of a review on what the actual conference was, how it came about, and what actually happened as a result. Whoever wants to start.
Well, I'll give you a wee brief on it. Envisioning the Future. First of all, I think the title changed on 2 or 3 occasions before we got to that, and for those that were in attendance, they seen our logo and it was explained that it was a dovetail joint, and the thinking behind that is if you Google dovetail joints, it talks about the resistance to being separated. So we looked at overall themes and what we wanted to achieve from this here. But I suppose as people that has been working in that community sector for quite a number of years, and predominantly within PUL communities, and at the minute we're obviously going through a very uncertain term, political uncertainty, let's say, and civic instability, and we thought, right, we've got to get communities together here. There was such a disconnect, no matter where you went, whatever community you were in, especially PUL communities. There was a cry out for leadership, there was a cry out for ideas, there was a cry out to let their voice be heard. So we decided, right, we're going to go province-wide here. We're going to strategically pick people from certain areas that some were involved in community development. Mm-hmm. Some, we had anything from a clergyman to a school teacher and everybody else in between attend there. And then what we done then, we were adamant that this was going to be a 2-day conference full of positivity, because we were aware of projects that were being delivered there right across the province. All the good, positive stuff and the empowering of people there in these PUL communities, but they're disconnected. That one didn't know what the other one was doing. So we did come up with a series of themes, and just to run through them. For example, we started off, we obviously decided on who our guest speakers was going to be, and up first was Professor Pete Sherlow from Liverpool University, telling us about why the union. He picked that theme. Followed on then with other themes such as culture as a solution, education. We had 2 school teachers, one from Londonderry, one from Belfast, looking at, let's say, models of good practice that they use that wouldn't normally be used in other, right across the education sector. Our story in the making, something very important, and I think that's maybe part of the reason that we're with yourself today, Glenn, is, you know, we have a lot of good stories to tell there, but how do we get it out in a positive, how do we communicate in a positive manner? And thanks to yourself taking part in one of the sessions that day too. And then we finished then day 2, from halfway through on day 2, we wanted to focus on solutions. We opened up to the floor for those that maybe didn't have the chance to contribute in the first day and a half or so, to make sure that everybody got buy-in. The outcome hopefully is going to be a short document. The last session, by the way, was called Unified Strategy, and that Unified Strategy is going to take place through this document, a summary of what happened, but more importantly, actions attached to the back of it. Short term, long term, medium term.
Sure.
It's going to be maybe a 20-page or something like that. And again, for those that are there, the only people that wasn't excluded from the first part of this series of events was politicians. It wasn't that we were just totally disgruntled with politicians or anything else. We felt, here's people wants their voice heard. We wanted to make sure they had an open floor and they were comfortable in doing that. So once we come together, create this document, we will follow that up with sessions with politicians, political parties,
Sure.
and other sectors. Youth, I think it's important that we incorporate youth and what ideas we have going forward here as well.
Brilliant. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about there was, obviously you've given us a good overview of what you were hoping to do, but where you said a wee bit about where it's come from. How long did it take you in terms of assessing the needs in terms of community, in terms of actually getting to the place where the conference was happening?
I'm very fortunate, look, see that I have two colleagues like these guys beside me. In 2012, an initiative by the Londonderry Bands Forum decided that, you know, we should look at similar minded groups and form a consortium of groups. Because in that PUL community, somebody like myself that's a member of all the institutions, the Orange, the Black Preceptorium, the Apprentice Boys, we are very parochial in our thoughts. So back 2012, and then the first employee that came on board was Mr. Derek Moore here on the Bands Forum beside me. They approached myself 2013. Don't forget that the UK City of Culture was coming to our city, the city of Londonderry. And what we found we had 6 similar minded groups coming round the table, and we just found that the strength that was there was more expertise, there was different levels of expertise. But personally, I can only say where I come from. We had 3 years without government here in Stormont.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found in the communities that we were in was that there was a cry out for, you know, some type of leadership. I have to say that we were identified as that alternative type of leadership. So this has been work in progress, Glenn, for 5, 6, 7 years.
Right.
Fast forward, you know, the reason I mentioned the UK City of Culture, we had similar issues where we had 60, 70 PUL communities sitting in a room, let's say disagreeing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't going to take part in this year-long party that was happening up in our city.
Right, okay.
And I remember it was a Friday night when I stood to my feet in St Collins Park and I says, right guys, I'm away home here, we need to submit proposals or we're going to miss this party. And some of the initiatives that we come up with, there was a Rabbie Burns event that was distributed across schools. And I suppose the big one, we had the European Highland Dance Championships that year, which was accepted and we got support for it. But it was the Wall City Tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way that myself and the organisation that I work for, the Inbreedy and District Ulster Scots Development Association, could have delivered that on their own. And only for that consortium of groups coming together. Now, we had an event that cost £550,000, 13,500 people attended that. But we had to raise 250 grand of that ourselves.
Right, okay.
Now we had that big marketing thing called UK City of Culture. It was successful. We went again in 2014 and it's been running since. There was one lapse for a year. We moved it from outdoor to indoor. Obviously we had a cutter cloth to suit. But it was identifying a cry for help out there from the MPUL communities and say, we need some guidance, we need some support here, folks.
Right. Glenn, I mean, James probably been a bit modest in all this as well. I mean, if you ask where this kind of process of alternative leadership that James referred to came from, I can probably trace it back a wee bit longer. I mean, in Londonderry, we're a very different breed of people up there because we've almost been forced into it. I mean, I've lived there all my life, 53 now. These guys are slightly older, but the principle's the same. I mean, if you're a minority community in a largely nationalist city, then your whole psyche and mentality kind of changes. I mean, we always refer to ourselves as being in Londonderry, peripheral to Belfast, peripheral to Dublin, peripheral to Westminster, peripheral to Brussels, but within Derry ourselves, as a minority community, we're even more. Same as outsiders, so for 50 years we've kind of been fighting for that voice, or fighting for that equality, and we don't want to sit here and slag off our elected representatives, but I mean, this vacuum didn't appear by magic. You know, this process didn't appear by magic. It came through basically a frustration as to how we were treated both within the city and how we were represented. So guys our age and our generation kind of came together through that frustration, and I suppose where some of our political leadership does deserve some credit was in the mid-90s there was a lot of negotiation that happened in the city around parading at the time, if you remember, particularly around the Apprentice Boys parade. But at that time it was more kind of mediation out of necessity. There was no sense of generosity coming from the nationalist community, or even from, I suppose, the unionist community towards nationalism. It was about finding a solution to the parade to ensure that our culture could continue to be expressed within the city. And so kind of people like William Hay and others and the Apprentice Boys, like Alistair Simpson, Billy Moore, they did, I suppose, break the glass ceiling in terms of negotiation. So we were kind of developing those linkages maybe before anywhere else in the province. And when we've kind of built on that, during that kind of vacuum that James referred to, that this kind of alternative leadership emerged that kind of says, well, okay, if we're not getting represented by political unionism, then someone else needs to step forward. And we're very lucky that there's about 4 or 5 people that kind of emerged that time. Derek, James, myself, Kenny McFarland, people like Johnny Burgess, Kyle Thompson, it all kind of came through at the one time. And I suppose the conference that James referred to is almost like a culmination of a lot of that. That we've said that we've used this model, this Londonderry Bands Forum model in the city, the Northwest Cultural Partnership model. We think that's transferable, because whenever we decided to kind of look beyond the boundaries of Derry Japan District Council, we spoke to like yourselves and people from across the province, we had the Care, the Impact Network, and Research, and all those groups. We were hearing the same thing. We were hearing there's other people need to stand up. Civic society needs to stand up. Civic unionism needs to stand up. And I think that's a lot of where the conference kind of emerged from.
Right, okay. And Derek, just to kind of bring you in a bit there, did you find that this started, where these ideas started come from, and obviously you've been involved in the bond forum, did there seem like there was a natural kind of dovetailing of work coming together? No, obviously people were maybe having different work focuses, but was there a sense that at some point this all seemed to be converging in the same direction?
I think I came into all this from the building trade, so I came at it from an extremely different angle, because all my life was always about solutions at your work. To get work done, you had to work with other people, and solutions had to be found regardless of personality or whatever. So when I came into this year, I was kind of lost at the start, to be honest. I really didn't know what way I was going to work. But I suppose lucky for me that the first part of work I had to do was with bands, and I've always been in the bands world. So that part of it felt dead easy. Tons of people wanted to work with us at the start, and then when I started to push out projects that I really would like to do, then people in the community sector kind of some of them fell away. And as the guys sort of say, like around the UK City of Culture stuff and all that there, which was in the year when I started, we started to get together, and then we had ideas among ourselves. Then how do you bring these big ideas, to come forward and stuff? So we had a couple of major problems, or not major problems, but we had a couple of major things to overcome right at the start. We tried to run stuff on Everton Square, but they had a policy about no flags and stuff. So we tried to run band stuff with colours and stuff like that. So so we had to do all that negotiating, and then you had other people that you could turn to say, what do you think we should do this, what do you think we should do that. So that idea of finding solutions to problems, and we have always had kind of issues on our own city that probably a lot of times early on was shied away from. But as soon as we all sort of got together, then we started to confront issues, and we started to hold people to account. And so I suppose in that sense, that's where all the people around the table with different skills, people a lot more savvy and a lot more civil than me. I've been blunt there at times, but I think there's a place for everybody in it. So working on that sort of premise, we kind of did a lot of work, and it really evolved into all these questions about where do we all need to go, or how can we dovetail together. We spend all our time here. We should all work together. In all honesty, not everybody wants to work together. There's a lot of gatekeepers there. There's a lot of people there who hold back progress, and hold back sometimes in the wrong way. You know, we all live in this one country. We all have to get on in this one country.
No, I hear what you're saying, because sometimes that whole "we all need to work together" is almost like a throwaway rallying call, and no one really means it. You know, there's like, yeah, let's all come together, and then let's just wait on somebody else taking the lead, and we'll come together with them. So obviously, it took a bit of time for you to get to the idea of like maybe a conference is something we should be looking at doing. Obviously, a lot of issues in terms of a lot of things that you've kind of encountered in terms of your work with the communities and work with different fraternities, organisations and stuff. How difficult was it to narrow it down to the programme that was outlined to us earlier on there? What was that process like of saying, well, listen, we've got 2 days. How do we prioritise what we focus on?
I think, Glenn, what happened was that before we talked about envisioning the future, the title was actually Solutions, which Derek has already alluded to here. We were adamant that we were going to have 2 days of positivity, and that in itself was a major change for any previous conferences or that type of forums that would have been pulled together. So I think once we got the overriding theme of good news, good templates are out there, good practice, you know, all of a sudden, right, we want to focus on solutions here, but we need to show people that here's a community that can actually deliver. You know, and as Derek or Brian said there, you look at the resurgence getting up there and doing their presentation, and you can see the guys, some of the people sitting back in their seats saying, my goodness, hey, they've achieved that from that type of thing. You've seen the befores and afters. So, look, it became a wee bit easier. It did take a bit of negotiating and thinking and talking to get to there, but once we come up with the overriding theme of solutions, positivity, well, we weren't settling for anything less than that.
Okay, and that just kind of all came together, and once you had it right, it's all about positive. There was a lot of stuff then went to the wayside as a result of that.
Look, see, you could have had a 22-day conference dealing with potential issues that we have here, but at the end of day 2, you know, the outcome that we wanted is, look, we've seen the good practice now. Brian mentioned there, we have templates that we feel that could work right across the province. Now, one size doesn't fit all, and we know that, but there was enough ideas, there was enough themes there to secure people's thoughts, you know, after the conference, and without ending up with a dislocated shoulder, patting ourselves in the back, but there was a general consensus to say, you know, potentially, some guys were saying this could be a game changer. Now that only puts people like us under more pressure saying that type of comment. But there was a lot of passionate people, a lot of people that believe in their communities and what they can deliver. And I think for the first time ever, we got a general consensus there that yes, this network of people have to stick together and deliver collectively.
All right. What was it like in the lead up then to that? There obviously. We're talking some of that years out coming, you know, the closer to the actual delivery of it. In terms of logistics, stress, pressure, all that kind of stuff, what was the actual lead up to the couple of days of the conference actually like for you all?
Well, again, briefly, look, we had good people. We took advice. It wasn't just the 3 guys sitting around this table. It wasn't just Northwest Culture Partnership. It was people like Professor Pete Sherlow, others from community sectors or different sectors right across the country, and those people that were there were handpicked. There was personnel there that were just parents of young people that got involved in cultural activity, whether it was bands, Highland dancing, music, whatever, you know. So look, see, certainly it was stressful, but because we're a consortium, and it's a wee bit like sitting on here today, Glenn, the technicalities were put in place. You were there, you seen the screens. It was almost like being involved in one of them talkback shows on TV, only it lasted for 2 days long type of thing. So a lot of time, a lot of effort did go into it, but you know, you feel secure within yourself whenever you know the level of expertise that you have beside you.
I think certainly there was no element of concern around the technical aspect. I mean, we're very lucky to have a broad range of really creative and skillful young people in our organisation. I suppose the only concern some of us might have had, including myself, was how maybe the audience would react, because we were a group of upstarts from Londonderry coming to speak to people with maybe a lot more years experience than ourselves from right across the province. And as James outlined, we were very specific in terms of getting a good cross-section of people from the unionist community, from academia through to the NGO sector to ex-combatants, and a geographical spread. You know, and we were inviting people like yourself and people like Resurgam and others with a lot more maybe a track record than ourselves. So my concern was there might have been a wee bit of that. You know, were people going to turn up? You know, were they going to take it seriously? You know, were they going to buy into it? And then, of course, there was also the concern of, you know, we were going in there, as James said, you know, with a very focused ethos throughout the conference around positivity. And I've been to many conferences over the years, and quite often they just descend into a winch fest, particularly if you're from Derry. You know, so we were saying, how are we going to last 2 days with this level of positivity, and people are going to buy into it? You know, so that was my concern, what the reaction was going to be, but thankfully it was all very positive.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there was definitely, you know, the experience there right across the board was, for me, it came across as an extremely professional event, you know, in regards to the setup, the registration side of things, and then just, you know, the kickoff from the event was actually really important too for me. Was that something that was planned? The piece of drama that you've got to start off the whole thing obviously address some of stereotypes and sort of like the typical responses. How much of was that planned by you guys, that you wanted something that would address that straight off and let's deal with the elephant in the room right away?
There's one of the co-authors.
I think it was a key theme in it, and believe it or not, like, we had a lot of discussion, especially around that part of it, because we didn't want to offend anybody, overly offend anybody in the room, because a lot of those characters represented some of the institutions and people who were in the room. So we had quite a think about that. But I think the important thing was that, you know, we are practical people in Northern Ireland, you know, and we sort of said we can look at ourselves objectively, and we're saying this is what we look like to the outside world. You know, we can change that, and we can work on that. And I think the drama worked really, really well. You know, it got a lot of the monkeys on people's backs, and to be fair, I think on the overall thing, I think the professionalism of Peter's first presentation, and the quality of who it was, you know, and I think the educational people, you know, there was and other people as mentioned there was Surgam, you know, we put ourselves at the bottom of the list for our own contribution there, but you know, I think that professionalism that really set the tone for it, and I think that's, along with the technicalities, which were absolutely astounding. I think one of the big things was when we got there, we didn't have much to do other than the presentation and present ourselves. You know, everything else was there waiting. You know, so we weren't running around with the worry of trying to keep everything going and everybody happy. Everything else was there. So,
no, that's it. If the tech gets in the way, then, you know, you've lost the plot straight away. But definitely, you couldn't have started any better with the drama, and then obviously with Pete kicking off with an extremely positive, you know, input around the union and why the union and benefits is all really did set the tone. Did anybody come and talk to you about the drama afterwards, though, just in terms of did it hit home with them or anything? Did you get much feedback in that direction?
Well, we have feedback from people, but it's only been a few weeks, and we haven't, like you mentioned yourself earlier on, we haven't got round to all the technicalities. So we have a lot of it there. But no, I think it went really well.
There has been quite a bit of feedback, you know, in general, but yes, about the drama and, you know, getting the scene set for that. You know, here's something different. You've got 70 people sitting in a room and they're saying, my goodness, we're starting off with a wee show here type of thing, not realising that they were actually one of the characters up on stage here as well. Look, the trick is on the title, Northwest Culture Partnership, and as already alluded to, we do use the power of performing arts, and we just think, you know, one of our partners, Johnny Burgess, Blue Eagle Productions, who's had many productions out there looking at different issues, but it's a great way of encouraging and enticing people to enter into discussion and dialogue.
Oh, definitely.
Such as a strength, you know, performing arts.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I thought it was definitely a great start in terms of that. Maybe what would be useful for us to talk about is your own personal experiences throughout the conference. You know, what was, aside from just being organisers, you know, what were some of the standout parts for you? What did you walk away from with it, outside of the fact that it went it went really well. What were some of the standout moments outside of the drama and Peter Shirley? Was there anything else that you were going, that was definitely worth us organising this for?
Well, a very short comment from me, and I'll hand over to the guys. A defining moment for me was that everybody that was there on day one come back on day two.
Right, okay.
So that took that was a lot of stress relief as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And I think for myself too, that's really exactly the one thing. There was no huge fall off. There was nobody slipping away after an hour or 2 hours that you normally see a lot of them things. It didn't engage people. But I think the overall thing was the positivity and the talk outside the conference, at lunch and everything else, when other people were coming up to you trying to network and say, could you help us out next year on this part, or could you do stuff there, or can we get together? So the connections within it were actually very, very good too.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, I think it was alluded to before. I mean, someone made the comment that it was a game changer. I mean, to me, it was really it was the fact that although we've been telling people who's willing to listen for as long as for years, and what we've picked up on our travels and speaking to other pro-union members of the community was kind of endorsed over those 2 days. Hey, people are sick of listening to negativity. There's so much good practice going on there. There's a disconnect between civic unionism and political unionism, but we need to be bringing it together, and let's collectively do that. And there wasn't one dissenting voice over the 2 days. And I know people stayed right to the end, even the 2 graveyard shifts, but I mean, they did that because I think people were just relieved to spend 2 days speaking and hearing of like-minded people, and that that we have a lot to offer our wee country, and let's promote it in a positive way. And I think that was the impressive and the pleasing thing for me.
Yeah. Did you just come away almost like reinvigorated in any shape or form? Obviously you haven't put a lot of effort into putting the thing on, and then obviously experiencing, what was going on. Did you come away going, right, here's momentum for us to go for it? Actually fueled your own, desire to see things pan out yourself?
Yeah, well, I think, Johnny Burgess always talks about the big number at the end, that keeps people thinking as they leave the room, and I suppose we were quite clever in the sense that we bookended it with the drama at the start and then Amy Gardner singing at the end, so people were kind of, I think, reinvigorated and had pride in their, being Northern Irish. But I think the work was done before that too. The feedback we were getting, the tweets, from people who were there and saying, look, this was fantastic, we need to keep this momentum going. The fact that we then as a group met very soon afterwards, and we've been trying to keep that momentum going because we know it's a very small window with these things, and people move on very quickly, but now I think the challenge is, we're already talking about organising the political workshop potentially at Stormont, hopefully on Monday. We've spoken to political leaders, we've kept in contact with academics and the other panellists, and we're keen to move it forward. We're looking to develop now a steering group based on the broader participation who were there at the time, to be that focal point to keep that momentum going. Because I know we've all got other responsibilities, but we're confident that the energy and the thirst and the desire, is there, going forward.
Mm.
Yeah, and I suppose the surprising thing coming away from it was, well, maybe not surprising, but next year it was going to be so positive, and left ourselves with the knowledge that we're going to have to keep this going. It's not going to falter. The people do want it, so it's really up to us to drive it forward. And like as Brian said there, we kind of realise the amount of work that that's going to take. But that's why this type of thing, and it's going on. I suppose. I've been fairly inspired this last year, so even listening to your own stuff without giving you too much. But I've never listened to a podcast in my life. I started listening to bands that made the great stuff, and I kind of realised how actually powerful that people talking and other people listening really is. And I think that coming back from the conference, I think that's one of the things I took away was a lot of people were there, they listened, they took it in, and they actually commented on it, which is really powerful.
Yeah, no, I think that was really useful for me as well. The broad stroke in terms of who was represented there, because sometimes you can bring a group from the PEL community together and you're almost stuck with the same stereotypes. Here's such and such and here's whatever, but there's such a wide base of people there, and even some of that middle ground people that Peter talked a lot about, the guys that are pro-union but just don't know where they stand in regards to the political side of things. Those guys being able to get up and say, well, listen, that's me, that's where I am, and this is how I feel about stuff. And I thought that was absolutely great.
Yeah. And we've got to remember as well, I mean, the kind of broader context to all this and the broader importance to it is the fact that, the all we're doing and all that group are doing is reflecting what broader society and within unionism in Northern Ireland is thinking. And the important thing now, particularly in the lead up to an election in May or whatever it is that our political representatives need to hear all this.
Yeah.
And I think we might have been a wee bit cynical at times during the conference in terms of, our expressing our apathy towards political leadership. But I mean, I think as I mentioned during the conference myself, we all want unified unionism, and we all want a political process that works, and we want sort of collective strategic thinking going forward. So I mean, to me, really important thing going forward now is that the findings through the document, through whatever medium, is given out to our political leaders, and we have spoken to them without divulging any names. We have spoken to them about this process, and we would hope that in January they'll take that on, so it won't be just us beating this drum anymore. It's representatives from, as you said, from across Northern Ireland, from a broad spectrum of backgrounds.
Yeah, I think it was great that the fact that the politicians weren't there. It's almost like, whenever you're facilitating something and your boss is in the room, or you feel like you don't know whether you can speak freely at times, or is this person actually going to take on board what I said? And I think it was definitely the right strategy, guys, in regards, like getting a freedom of speech coming out from people. Listen, say what's on your mind. There's a freedom here, doesn't necessarily matter. As long as this is positive, then nothing's off the table here, so you got to feel good about that.
Well, just to give you an example, Glenn, there was one young lady who I encouraged to sit on a panel who phoned me the night before and says, James, I don't think I'm up for this here.
Right.
And believe me, I'm not a public speaker. And I says, look, see, she's in this building that we're in here today, and she's already taken part in your podcast. And I sat down, I talked to the young lady, and I says, you won't be put under any pressure, you won't be asked difficult questions, this is about your story. Now, I seen how that lady performed up there, and absolutely brilliant, absolutely magic as far as I'm concerned. And it was great to hear about a week after in your podcast where she sat and discussed with yourself for almost an hour, looking at local issues. She touched on the conference as well, and her thoughts coming from that, so that's the type of empowerment, that's the opportunity. But I think what people need to realise that was at that conference, they organised it as well as us. We were influenced by what other people were doing in other areas. We only pushed a few buttons, at the end of the day, and we invited a few speakers and a few panellists. But it's the 70 people that were sitting in there that actually created the themes and everything without them realising that.
Yeah.
I've had conversations in the last 2-3 years about this without actually saying what it was about, type of thing, so everybody needs to take a bit of credit that was there.
No, I think, and was there a hope then of some kind of ripple effect, that this would stir something up, and then people would go out and say, listen, here's what's happened to me here, you've got to hear some of this stuff, and the hope that stirs up some of that response that you're looking to get, because, as you say, I mean, it's almost like a microcosm of this, the unionist community in regards, there's just so much work that needs to be done, and it's like, where do you start? And getting the momentum, or at least getting a start up, or getting some kind of fire, saying, listen, there's something really positive for us to get involved in. Did you sense that there was going to be, like, this has a potential to ripple out and see people coming back and going, well, listen, we want to be involved?
Well, personally, we were hoping that was going to be the effect that it would have on people, organisations, and I suppose, again, another example, as somebody who's a member of the Orange Institution and got about a week later the Orange Standard, and if you go to page 20, it's a full page, very positive on the conference, and that was coming back from the representatives that they had there.
Right.
Now, Brian, myself and Georgina, who talked a bit about Sola School of Highland Dance, and her experiences there. We were invited to Hillsborough on the Thursday night, bearing in mind this was the day after the finish of the conference, and whenever the Secretary of State's standing talking to you and saying, right guys, we need to take it to the next level, that's whenever the pressure's on a wee bit then, you know, so, and that's great, but it has to be collective. Brian alluded to it, it's a team effort, it's everybody that was there, we can't do it on our own, and I don't think that'll be the case.
Okay, so that leads me nicely on though. You've kind of hinted about where things might be going next, and you've a lot of stuff to kind of, you know, sift through and kind of, you know, evaluate and then try and develop some kind of action plans and stuff. But what is coming next then? Where are you going with this?
Well, I mean, this process will hopefully keep building momentum. Glenn, I mean, if you remember during the 2 days of the conference, we talked about this idea of a cultural hub across the province, you know, or kind of a series of cultural hubs. I mean, our model, the Northwest Cultural Partnership, that isn't rocket science. It's about bringing together like-minded groups, you know, that maybe are peripheral or have felt fragmented. I mean, you referred to it about there's so much stuff we need to be doing. To me, it's about starting from the grassroots up, working with the organisations that are already there. In the Northwest, I mean, there's a number of sporting clubs, orange halls, community groups, bands that are almost working in isolation. You know, and what we try to do through our model is bring all those groups together and into one central pot called the Northwest Cultural Partnership. And what we're trying to do is encourage or identify and encourage that model to be replicated across the province. I mean, we have taken the proposal through New Decade New Approach to the Secretary of State and others, and you know, and we were looking at potentially identifying 6 similar-minded hubs across Northern Ireland. But realistically, you mean you can have one in each council area, and that's about each of those kind of bringing through, going out, reaching out to those peripheral groups and bringing them within this context. So to me, the long-term aim is to develop that process, and when we've always been looking at you know, what kind of organisation or what kind of group brings all that together. And we talked at the start briefly about creating a steering group or a representative group from the conference. And to me, I think that representative group could be the core executive committee of the hub idea. Sure. So it's a simple process. Get 6 hubs, get 6 good people. And I mean, we were lucky 10 years ago. We had Derek Moore brought into St. Colm's Park House. He sat in a porta cabin for, you know, that was his job, and it was out of this acorn, developed the Londonderry bands for him. James Key was doing something very similar out in the rural sticks of Brady. Another acorn that came together, and now we have this kind of organisation that's doing a lot of good work, working with hundreds of young people in schools right across the Derry-Strabane District Council area. Get the right people, get the right person in each of these hubs, and let them develop. We've recently recruited Jeff Musgrove from OMA, who we're hoping will do the same. You know, so it's about that, and let's get that collective voice going.
Okay, so there's an element of not just actually talking about this, you're actually starting to implement already. You're finding ways of how can we influence the communities surrounding us, and let's get some level of enablement going on there, so that, you know, there's a platform for people to launch off and see that there's something practical actually coming out of this, rather than, you know, because all we've heard for years and years from our politicians has been talks, and not really seeing some of the action that we want to see. You guys seem to be putting something on the map.
Well, and we're perfectly, I mean, the timing's perfect at the moment, because not only have we an election coming up and politicians wanting quick wins, but we're in the middle of a process around potential legislation around the Cultural Act coming from Westminster. Mm-hmm. You know, and I mean, we've been, maybe contrary to what some unions think, we're actually of the opinion that this Cultural Act could be really, really important in terms of bringing pro-union and pro-British culture up to parity to Irish culture. I mean, we had a meeting with a government official this morning, and one of our colleagues referred to it as cultural levelling up. You know, potentially this Cultural Act, that, you know, that we're starting to get potentially could get investment into marching bands, and into Highland dance, into Ulster Scots language, into heritage, into education. You know, the models are out there. We saw them during the conference. You know, so here we have potentially an opportunity for that investment to go in and really make this stuff work.
Yeah, Derek, talk to me a bit about that from the band's perspective.
Well, I mean, from a band's perspective, you're in a band yourself, Glenn. You know, I mean, bands have only recently started getting a few pound, and it is a very, very few pound. You know, so like, you know, a lot of investment could be done there, especially in the, you know, we spoke before about the educational level in the schools.
Yeah.
About teaching the instruments in the schools, teaching the meaning of it, and teaching the significance of it. And I suppose. What we've really done, you know, we've always had it the whole way back to the apprentice boys taking money from a fund to support someone. You know, the first thing we as a PEL community do is turn around and condemn that. You know, and the chances of you know, maybe the same kind of negativity appearing now, when we have an opportunity, instead of looking over our shoulder, we should look forward for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we should look at that, and we should take it with us. There's a lot of things that we need. That we need help with. You know, there's the hub idea itself. There's an opportunity there because that structure's already there within the culture lands and the Gaelic clubs in this country. You know, so you know, maybe now's the chance for us to create that same sort of thing. But I suppose it's not only about looking at that, it's about looking at future leaders, it's about getting young people in, it's about getting debate, it's about getting discussion, things we never do. You know, we're comfortable sitting in a bar watching football, chatting them, you know, but we're not comfortable getting young people in to discuss what's good and bad about the country, or what's been good and bad about you know, Northern Ireland in the past. You know, how do we take it all forward? How do they take it forward for themselves? It's not our, it wouldn't be our time, it'll be their time. You know, so we need to get them young people there, and we need to get them debating and looking forward for themselves in the future.
Talk to me a wee bit more about the work that these guys do in schools, especially around the learning of instruments and dance and stuff like that. Because I think that's something that's really important for people to grasp. You know, that because some people see this as a closed education, as a closed. You know, it's a closed chapter. You can't get in on it. You know, but you guys are making inroads in that there and doing it very well. Talk to the listeners a wee bit about what programs you have going on and how they're actually going.
Well, the programs we have going on, we've got full-time tutors. We have a full-time tutor delivering tuition in Highland bagpipes, B-flat flute, and Highland dancing. Now, these are two instruments and an art form of Highland dance that offer accreditation to kids. Now, this isn't something that happens overnight, Glenn. You know, this package has been developed and created over a period of years, 7-8 years. And, you know, before it was a really, really tough sell to get into schools. But again, another example, I remember sitting in a school in Londonderry, a secondary school, and you know, a controlled school, and you mention Ulster Scotch, and you mention bagpipes, and you mention flutes, and say, oh, we don't want to. It's almost as if you were going to offend somebody, and I don't want to offend some of the kids' parents and stuff like that. I said, is that right? You know, and I always keep something up my sleeve and say, do you realise that you have got two 16-year-old kids in here? No, sorry, 14-year-old kids with 75 UCAS points. And the head teacher says, that's impossible. And then, of course, I give a rationale as to no, it wasn't impossible. He did have the kids within the school. And once you create a package to sell, something as positive as that there, well, all of a sudden then they're all over you, right? Now we can't meet the demand.
Right, okay.
You know, the only thing I would differ with, and Brian's comments earlier on, Brian, about 6 hubs, I'm saying we need 11, one in each council area.
Right, okay.
I always say it's easier to come down than it is to go up sometimes, you know. But no, the 3 tutors are teaching approximately 900 kids a week through the curriculum, but that's not counting the outreach work that they do.
Sure.
You know, for example, the Highland Dance is anywhere from Cookstown right up to Omagh, Drumquin area, and anywhere in between. But you know, we're sitting now. This is something that started in the year 2000. Whenever a tutor come across from Fife in Scotland, spent 9 years with us. So our young dancers that started then are now accredited teachers within their own right. And I've got 2 people, Georgina, who manages all that, and Emily, who's decided to take that up as a career going forward, and they're employed full time. But that's a typical model that I know can work province-wide. And fair play to the Education Authority, have jumped on board and supported it. The only issue we have, it's sort of year-on-year commitment. Come the end of March and you don't know if you're going to be employed on the 1st of April type of thing.
Sure.
So that's where the lobbying and the influence will continue to make sure that we do get the opportunity to deliver that right across the province.
Yeah, it should be good as some of the results for that should be really hitting home with them. I know it's different, they've got obviously there's budget and priorities and all that kind of stuff, but the teachers in the schools you're working with have got to be seeing benefits from you guys being in working with them.
We did hear the 2 teachers speaking that day, and again, look, see, it's a tough occupation being a school teacher in any school, and we know that, and they are willing to dovetail. We keep using this word dovetail with community, with the outreach work providers that's there. We heard guys there, I think it was Stephen and Andrew, who do outreach youth development work, after schools work, and there is a willingness there for schools to link all that together. And don't forget, wee Ginny that's learning Highland dancing, or wee Johnny that's learning the B-flat flute, they've got mammies and daddies and homes and aunts and uncles, and that's why it is such a big, massive constituency that has been created here.
And there's certainly been an issue as well around, James touched on, that kind of cultural shift that's needed within schools. It's taken a while for the schools in Londonderry. We always talk about, use the example of, if a young Catholic kid was standing with a bow drum at a bus station, they were seen as a musician, whereas if a young Protestant with a flute was standing, he was seen as a bigot or a thug, and that cultural mentality fed within even the Protestant or so-called Protestant schools as well. So it's taken a while to change that, and it hasn't. That still hasn't reached the end of the road. I think Michael Allen, thankfully at the conference, talked about that. And Michael was in a band himself in Nelson Drive, so he gets it, but he talked about having, a genuine commitment to community development or a genuine commitment to community integration. Some schools just pay lip service to it, and it's not just, I suppose, UCAS points in the musicianship, but it's the fact that, you have young bandsmen who quite often, for example, are the low education attainers within their communities, or the young people within their communities with low self-esteem, and being in a band and then having that respected in school as well by teachers,
Sure.
as musicians, has a huge positive impact in terms of self-esteem as well. So I think the teachers are starting to maybe potentially recognise that.
Yeah, no.
And the other thing about it is, on the flip side of that, and through my work in the bands room early on and stuff, we were also able to take that culture in the maintain sector and take away the mysticism about being in a band, about what it was like, and I think that really paid dividends in our own council area. The fact that you were in, that you were getting asked questions. I always say, like, we went the first time we did it, we were expecting a whole raft of things about, parading through contentious areas and stuff. But to be honest, the questions that came was, what does bands do for disabled people? What do they do for gender issues? Why is there such a disparity? For bands men and bands women. Like, why is the girls carrying the flags and not doing the flute and stuff? You've had it yourself on the podcast thing. So that's the flip side of that. There has also allowed us. It's as James was earlier about the theatrical discussions. It opens up that discussion just on your own community environment, and it allows people to question why and what you do it for. And that has allowed us to sort of give a rationale that you don't practice 365 days to offend somebody for one day. That's for sure. You understand that better than anybody. So and that's why we get the language thing. Because if people are interested, then they're interested. For me, it's just like playing a flute. It's great to get the first 5 words out, but then you have to start singing the sentences together. It's just like playing the tunes, and that's when the difficulties start. But that's where it's kind of important for that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're echoing something that it's definitely part of my own thought process behind Made to Parade, and I suppose some of the other new media things that have come out of the community as well is that understanding is better than knowledge. To be able to understand what's going on rather than what it is you think you might know is a completely different scenario. And one of the things that's come out very, very strongly from what I'm hearing you guys saying is the importance of something so simple as relationships. Being in relationship with people and building relationships with schools, building relationships with other agencies is so important in order to make sure that, one, our voice gets heard, but also, two, that it does do this demystification of who we are and what it is that we actually do and stuff, and I think that's so important. But yet, it doesn't take much. I mean, building relationships are stuff that's part of everyday life.
I think it doesn't take much, and it just brought something onto my head there. The first time Michael Allen actually came to the bands forum, what he actually asked the bands forum to do was to tell the young band members who went to school, come to school the way you go to your band, be dressed, have your uniform clean and tidy, know your stuff, and the people that's teaching you, listen to what they're saying and do what you're asked. He says if they can do that in the band and they can do that in the school, we all get on better together. Mm-hmm. You know, and it was a simple message, but it was straightforward.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I think that's where maybe that even you talked a lot about that level and upside of things as well. And that's for me, that's where this starts. It starts with, are we willing to have relationships? Because regardless of who we engage with or how we engage with them, that doesn't water down who we are or what's important to us. And I think there's almost sometimes a fear sometimes of engaging because, what do we have to give up, or we're going to be tainted by this if we take this particular pot of money, that that's us tainted as a result of that. And the way I remember talking, it's like, well, you know what, money changes character when it changes hands. So it what we do with it is it doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as what we're doing with it is pretty good. So folks, in terms of maybe trying to tie things up a wee bit here in regards to closing off, what would your closing thoughts be in regards to what your hopes are for the work that you're doing now in the future?
Well, I just hope we can take it to the next level. I'm just chuffed to bits that I feel that we had people within the room the 2 days of the conference that are, let's say, they've been very, very persuasive since and making sure that we do try and take it to the next level. And turn, like I told you today, Glenn, the people in the room, those are the guys that created that opportunity, not only us, because they did create the themes and they do like that positivity. But look, the momentum's there, the passion's there, and if you can get people with momentum and passion, something will come out the other end. And if we focus, I know that I wasn't at the meeting, but the guys met with let's say an MP and one of the top politicians in this country there on Friday, and I've alluded to Georgina on a couple of occasions, and she actually stopped this guy talking and said, hang on a wee minute, should we not focus on what we can deliver and what we want to deliver? Would that not be our best strategy? Mm-hmm. Certainly we have to keep an eye on what's happening in different circles and everything else, but we need to remember that we need to strategize for what we want to see in 10, 15 years time. And I think the certain person took it on board, and let's just say, Glenn, watch this space.
Okay, happy days.
Yeah, and I my hope would be that we carry on the positiveness from the stuff I had from the conference. But we don't look a gift horse in the mouth. We don't turn down opportunities because of what we think it might do for someone else. We look at what it can do for ourselves and what it can do for our own culture and our own future and our own expression of it. And for me, that's everything.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, and something to add to that is that I hope that in 2 or 3 years' time we aren't still talking about fractured unionism, but we're talking at a more collective level.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's spot on for me, because if there was anything that was a tired phrase for me, it's fractured unionism, and it's been fractured that long. There's no, the NHS couldn't sort it out and stuff. So for me, definitely, if we can get a real collective, a real sense of, listen, stuff's working and seeing quick wins, and I think but it's also about being in this for the long term. This isn't about just short, sharp shock. It's about, we need to have people who are committed to this for the long term. You guys didn't turn this around in 6 months. You are talking years of strategizing, years of connection, years of pounding the street and making sure that people listen to what you have to say, and changing your own strategies, changing your own thought process, challenging yourselves in regards to, I'm sure some of the stuff that you guys have had to do over the last years is put your backs up a bit and kind of going, God, what am I actually doing here? What this is, challenging yourself, going, what are other people's perceptions of this going to be as well? But for the greater good, you're pressing through, and I think that's great. And I hope that we get to be a part of that journey as well. The guys that are involved in Made the Parade, i.e. me, and maybe one other person. As I say, I'm up for anything that's positive. I mean, that's my one of my taglines for the things is all about positive stories, sharing the positive side of things, and I think that's extremely important. So, folks, thank you very much for taking the time out to be on Made the Parade, sharing about the conference and sharing about some of the hopes that you have for the Unionist Loyalist community in the future. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.